Alright, today's video is about the ELD, the logbook exemption for the current pandemic that is going around the world, and how you can avoid getting tickets from DOT people misinterpreting the rules. Okay, hope you like the video. If you haven't subscribed, please do it. How's it going? We're at the start of April. It's Friday the 2nd of April and I am in Flags West truck stop just over the Idaho border on I-15. If you ever want really good French toast, eggs and bacon, this is the place to come. But a couple of things I'd like to have a little video about, and one of them is the hours of service exemption. So I think I've said in previous videos that we're in the middle of a DOT audit at the minute. Nothing overtly wrong. They just got a couple of tickets for logbook violations that are illegal tickets, really, in my opinion, and also in a DOT officer's opinion as well. So the same thing happened this week, and this is how you need to deal with this. Ready? Listening? The law for the exemption for this pandemic that we're in the middle of, that I don't want to use the name of, is that we can go and restock food, and I'll just explain to you what happened. We have not run a logbook in almost a year now, and it's always food. We've got refrigerated trailers, it's always food, and Justin was coming into Wyoming of all places, who are really usually quite fair with us, and he called me up and said, "Hey man," he had chicken on, load of chicken, "these guys are shutting me down for 10 hours and giving me a violation and a fine and all this stuff." I said, "Put the guy on." Put him on, and I spoke to the gentleman at the weigh station. So every state has different rules and different levels of training, shall we say. So here's rule number one that you need to, thing number one. You realise that in a weigh station there are weighmasters, and there are highway patrolmen, and there are DOT officers. That's the three levels of personnel that you can have. Some states will train a highway patrolman in some of the DOT regulations to save in personnel. Some states have got dedicated DOT guys. In the state of Idaho, it's usually the guys running around in the pickup trucks with the shell on the back of them. They're the DOT men. In Idaho, the people who are weighing your trucks are not DOT officers. Don't quote me 100% on that, but that's what I understand. Some states, the guys who are weighing you can be trained in DOT stuff as well. So right there you can see there's some room for error. So I have the mobile phone number of the DOT officer who is doing an audit. He wants to see bills are laden, rate confirmations, all that stuff. So we've done all that and everything's fine there. So he told me this is how it works. Because every state has got a certain level of DOT education, not every DOT officer or person acting on behalf of the DOT is as trained as they perhaps should be. Okay? So back to Justin. Gets pulled over. They want to write my ticket, and I said, "Listen," I spoke to the gentleman. I said, "Hey, I really don't want you to write this ticket because we're running under an exemption for the C word, right? And he said, well, you're not qualified to run under that, you're hauling chicken, that's not a product. And he said, and your guy went down to Florida with a bunch of onions and that's not covered under it either. I said, he says it's not on the list of exempt items. I said, that is not the correct exemption. I can assure you that he is exempt. And he said he doesn't have a record of status for 7 days either. I said, would you please do me a favour, before you write out this ticket and it's on my record, incidentally, if you do get a ticket on your DOT number for a violation, don't appeal it to that state, don't appeal it to that guy's boss or whatever. You have to go into a thing called data queue, or data queue, or whatever you want to call it, and appeal it to the feds. The federal government will look at that, the FMCA looks at every appeal, and they're judging it rather than some guy backing up his buddy. Following? So he was gracious enough to take my suggestion and call up the DOT officer for the state of Wyoming, the FMCSA person for the state of Wyoming. So he calls him up, and at the same time I call up my DOT guy in Idaho and said, hey man, we're getting pulled over here and the guy's going to write us a violation. We're hauling chicken, it's going into a distribution centre, and he said these words: you're innocent till proven guilty. They have to prove that the product that you're hauling is not for emergency use. Okay, it's not up to you to prove that it is for emergency. They have to prove that it's not. Okay, that's the first thing that I thought was quite apt. And the other thing is, the officer said to me on the phone, the Wyoming guy said, it has to say on the bill of lading that this is an emergency load. The rules are, it does not have to say that, it never mentions that in the exemption. It's not in the rule book that it has to say that this is part. You have to say that it's an exempt load, that it's an emergency load. You don't have to prove it's an emergency load. If you tell them it's an emergency load, that is supposed to suffice. So the guy speaks to his DOT officer, I get advice from mine, and mine also tells me, call the FMCSA guy in Wyoming and tell them what's happening, because they should know the rules properly. So I try to call, can't get them, goes to the answer service. They're on the telephone. I later found out they're on the telephone to the officer that's dealing with my driver. So Justin calls me back once the guy is done with the conversation with the DOT officer and says, yeah, they're not going to put me out of service for 10 hours, but the violation still stands. I said, that can't happen. I said, that can't happen. If he's going to give you, take that 10 hours off, the violation can't stand. If you're exempt from the rules, you don't need to carry a log, because every load is exempt. So you're carrying a blank piece of paper. Let me explain further. The way it was explained to me by the DOT guy in Idaho, he said, if you're under dispatch for a load, so if I said to my driver, hey, you're in Idaho Falls now, I want you to run over to Boise and pick up a load that's exempt and go down to Florida, he's allowed to go without logs across the state, pick up that load, run down to Florida, no logs. If he gets to Florida and I say, go pick up a load of furniture, he has to then use logs to deadhead there and pick up the load, and when he's hauling that load. If I dispatch him on a load of sweet corn coming back up the Salt Lake, he can deadhead to get his sweet corn without logs and do the load without logs, because it's a food load. Yeah, it's an exempt load. And the guy said to me he doesn't have 7 days, and so I said to him, and I explained that to the DOT guy in Wyoming again. I said, would you please call back again and get clarification in that? So he called back again, kind of grudgingly this time. I said, because look, I've been this whole time I'm talking to my DOT guy up here, and I said, I am going to fall between, I'm going to get a violation written on my DOT number when one guy says that it should be and another guy says it shouldn't, and they're both DOT men. So I said, can you please clarify this, because my guy's saying that it's not a violation and you're saying that it is, and I didn't want to say he's more qualified than you are, but so he went away and checked and come back and he let Justin go. And then I got a telephone call from the DOFMCSA officer in Wyoming, because they had a missed call from me, and the officer there said, yep, I explained the situation. I was actually dealing with that situation, that's why you couldn't get hold of me. Your DOT officer in Idaho was exactly right. There are so many people that don't really know the rules, and we have to research them sometimes. So my guy over here wanted to know what the outcome was, so I called him up and said, hey, you were absolutely right. They said that you were spot on, and he said, we have an FMCSA guy here who knows all the rules. He knows everything about it. He knows what we can do, what we can't do, what you can prove and what you can't prove. And he says, when we pull you over, we have to be able to prove that you're in violation. And it's not what we think that you're violating, we actually have to prove it. So that is the upside of and downside, you know, because they've got authority and they've got a gun in their hip, and you're in a way station and you're in their territory, it's easy to be intimidated and just take what's coming to you. So I got stuff sent to me for frequently asked questions on this exemption and where people go wrong, and there's clarification on it, when you're allowed to use it, when you're not. There are examples, and I've taken copies of that and we're putting them in the front of your folder with all your paperwork in it. So we've got that in the trucks for the guys to use it if there's any clarification, because the guys that are pulling you off don't know all the answers. You know, there's a lot of rules out there, and in fairness to them, it changes all the time. This exemption changes all the time, and it gets extended, and you know, so it's quite confusing. So I was recommended by our DOT officer here, put the law in there, put the scenarios into your folder, and say this is from the government. It's not a suggestion for you to, you know, I might imply it, and I might take this bit out of it and put it in, and I might only use this bit. It's a freaking federal law, you know, so it needs to be it needs to be used the way it's supposed to be, and know how a DOT officer thinks it should be, or a sheriff thinks he knows the rules when, you know, he really doesn't. They're not trained to the same level that a DOT officer is. So we didn't get a violation in that, and if I hadn't been in my audit and had that guy's phone number, I probably would have got a ticket, you know. So all the guys know, phone me up, don't accept the ticket, say, hey, I need to talk to my boss first, and that's it. Have the paperwork there. The exemption is there for a reason. The rates are going up in trucking, the fuel prices are going up. You cannot buy a new truck or a used truck now for freaking love nor money. There is a shortage of trucks. I went into the dealer up in Idaho Falls, and Freightliner dealer, every truck was sold in the used market. There was a 2018 Cascadia with 550,000 miles there that they just sold for $97,000. They can't get the new trucks out the factories because of what's been going on, and so that's forcing up the used prices, and people just keep a hold of them. So if you're going to retire, this is probably the time to do it. But that's what I've found out about the exemption. If you're not using it, you should be using it, because I love it, you know. And here's the thing, right? I'd really like somebody from the government to have nobody's going to be watching this that, you know, that I can influence, but it would be really great if somebody could have a bit of common sense and look at the figures. Ever since they've taken our handcuffs off and let us run free, I don't think there's any more accidents. I don't think there's any. Alright, there's certainly weather related accidents that we've had in Dallas and stuff like that, which you know, that's going to happen, but that's not because of driver's hours and all that type of thing. This is all supposed to be in the, you know, for safety, but yeah, I got up this morning when I was ready to go up, and I went and picked up, and then I can go work tonight and get into a position, and you can use your common sense. And here's the thing, I was talking to my son about this, and he said, you know, people seem to forget the driver has got more skin in the game than anybody else. You know, the driver doesn't have a death wish. You know, these truck drivers like me out in the road, we don't want to die. We don't want to fall asleep and crash. We don't want to get into situations where we're in danger, and I don't want to sound selfish. Forget about everybody else. I don't want to die. You know, if I'm feeling tired, I'm going to pull over and sleep. But if you have to go by the rules, sometimes with the ELDs, you find yourself driving when you don't want to drive, you don't feel great about it, but you can't lose your hours. But if you could take a 5 or 6 hour nap, you get up and you be away fresh. But instead of that, you're in that 24-hour cycle where unless you start taking time off, you are stuck with working at night, you know. So, but it would be nice if somebody with a bit of common sense could just go, hey, you know what, this is pretty good. There's a shortage of trucks, the rates are high, so obviously if they bring in the rules again, that means that we will haul less loads, which will in turn make the demand for trucks higher because there won't be as much supply. And when the demand is higher and there's not enough supply, prices go up, you know, and price of goods go up because the transportation goes up, and then the price of the goods to the customer and the everyday person goes up. So just let's keep doing this. Yeah, there is a little thing called the small guy advantage here, you know. I don't think Swift and all the big mega carriers are running without the logs. They're just kept it, it's just as easy for them to keep going than it is to change. So we've got a slight advantage over them right now, and that we can work our freaking tails off, man. So it feels a bit more like it used to do when I first started doing this. You feel a bit like a bit of a cowboy, and all my friends in Scotland will think I always was a cowboy, but no, a bit of a, you know, you're flat out across America hauling stuff to, you know, to warehouses and supplying cities, and, you know, as they always say, every single thing that you use, see, touch, generally, every product that's not nature has been hauled in a truck in one form or another. Sometimes have been hauled half a dozen times, you know, like from the forest to the lumber mill to the factory to the warehouse, you know. So, but anyway, truckers are freaking great, eh? I hope you enjoy the video. I've rambled enough. Speak to you again.